This is Steve Zeltzer with Pacifica and WorkWeek. Today, the ILWU has voted to take action, two actions in solidarity with George Floyd and also on Juneteenth. And I'm with this afternoon Trent Willis, who's president of San Francisco ILWU Local 10, and Keith Shanklin, who's president of ILWU Local 34. Welcome to WorkWeek.
Thank you.
So Trent, why don't you talk about what is going on and the action the ILWU has taken today and what you see is important for the rest of the labor movement about your action?
Well, first I'd like to start off by explaining my personal situation to our viewers here. As we stand up and raise our voices for the disenfranchised and the victims of police brutality and murder. In 1983, my older brother, his name was Todd Leonard Willis. He was killed in the same manner by the police as brother George Floyd. He was choked to death. And it was the military police, Fort Carson, Colorado. And just to see that video of brother George Floyd being choked basically for 8 minutes and 46 seconds really brought back some painful memories that pretty much have never gone away for me. So, you know I'm the president of the ILWU Local 10, but I have a personal investment also in putting forth my effort to put an end to systemic racism and police brutality and police murder. Just to start from the beginning, on June 2nd, I sent a letter from Local 10 to our international president, William Adams, where we were demanding that labor add its voice to the many protesters and activists all over the world that are outraged at what they saw on the news in regards to brother George Floyd. And that was a call for us to, first off, take an action on a very significant day for African Americans, Juneteenth, which celebrates the Emancipation Proclamation, and when the slaves in Texas found out they were free. In other words, it is the African American 4th of July, basically. I had that letter sent up and down the entire coast to every local on the coast. And to make a long story short, it culminated into an action that we're going to be taking on June 19th, Juneteenth, where every local up and down the coast will be shutting down to protest systemic racism and police brutality, and also to honor brother George Floyd. And we're also doing another action tomorrow that I'll let my brother Keith Shanklin motivate, because it was actually his idea, and it came from Local 34. And he and I worked very closely together while we decided to merge our two campaigns, and the rest is history.
Keith, you want to speak on the action tomorrow?
Yeah, as Trent alluded to, that we work together. Not only do we work together, we like two peas in the pod. We have similar same ideas, and we also share the same views. And the main view that we do share is the one for human rights and positive working conditions, and that human rights and better working conditions, and that the union is the best way to go. Now, we came together on a couple of days ago, and we was thinking of a way to honor this brother who was brutally murdered in Minnesota by a cop who, I don't have words to describe the way I feel about that cop without being able to go to jail myself. When you see a man laying on the sidewalk motionless, who has defecated and urinated on himself, that lets you know that that person has released all bodily functions and that he is absolutely dead. But to continue to impose that chokehold on him was beyond what you would call human condition. That was just total disregard for that man's life. You gave no thought about the condition of what you were doing to that man at that time. You ceased from being a part of the human race and became of the only race, and that's racism. And we have no tolerance for that here in this society. Now, tomorrow at 9 a.m., when the services for Brother George Floyd will be handled tomorrow at 9 o'clock, we as longshore workers and Workers United and people all over this planet, especially the East Coast and West Coast and up and down the borders. I've been told by Brother Garcia, who is also a member of GSC, who also has a major truck line, that all the truckers and longshoremen are going simultaneously at 9 o'clock, either take a knee or shut down their engines or do what they can do at 9 o'clock for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to honor Brother George Floyd for what happened to him, George Floyd, for what happened to him in May with that racist police putting his knee on his neck. Now, I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is in tribute to him, but this is not the end all, because with this momentum that we have going now, the young kids who are out there protesting, the young kids who are out there demonstrating, the young kids who are looking for answers. Your answers are in your votes. Your answer is you go to those polls and you exercise your right. Your answer is to go out there and do what you do. Put somebody in these offices who look like you, who act like you, who believe in the things that you do. Don't go in there voting for who's popular. Vote for somebody who's going to do something about it. Because vote for somebody who's popular might go in there and just sit down and go to the lunchroom and eat his lunch. No, we need somebody to go down and eat everybody else's lunch and then stay on top of his game and make sure we get some changes in here in the United States, because without change, we haven't done anything. We just gone business as usual, business as it's saying. We need to start with a systemic change. And that starts with the young kids these days, because they are the voice of our future.
We've been talking with Keith Shanklin, president of ILWU Local 34. Now, Trent, the history of racism in this country is from the beginning with Native Americans. Genocide was committed on Native Americans, and also the history of slavery and racism, including attacks on workers on the job. And has there been racism against African Americans on the job, on the docks?
Yes, we've actually had in recent history, we've had some attacks on the docks here, where we've had some very derogative racial graffiti, swastikas being drawn on the walls. We've had some instances of nooses being hung on the wall. Hung on fences and in vehicles. And all of this started after Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. I just want to add that, because I've been on the waterfront for 25 years, and I have never seen anything like that until Donald Trump was elected president. And the thing is, with Donald Trump is his willingness to push his fascist, racist rhetoric is causing a whirlwind of idiotic people to come out of hiding, come from under their rocks. And they feel emboldened and free to promote systemic racism. Now, when we say the fight for systemic racism is the important fight, because all of I picture the systemic racism as a tree, and then all of the branches represent the different ways that systemic racism is imposed on people. Police brutality and police murder is just one of the branches of systemic racism. If you look back at the history of the police back in the 1800s and before then were used to hunt down slaves. That was the police's job, to hunt down slaves and to either kill them or return them to their owners. Okay. If you fast forward into recent history, you'll see that their program hasn't changed much. They're still an outfit that looks out for corporate interests, and when working people of all colors try to unite together to demand better wages and conditions on jobs, the police are often called in to violently destroy those campaigns. The ILWU's history starts with police murder, the murder of two protesters in 1934, when our union was in its fight for the right to exist, the right to be treated fair, and the right to have a union hall and a right to have a contract. So nothing has changed. We're still having the same problems, like I said before, with racial graffiti. For that to be happening in 2020 is proof in itself that labor, for sure, which is the strongest outfit that people in this society have to raise their voices, because we're not rich people. The only thing we have to use against the powers that be is our labor. And when members of the labor movement, black, white, yellow, brown, all people band together and use the power of their labor to fight against systemic racism, then systemic racism doesn't have a chance, period. So that's what this is all about.
And you're calling on the rest of the labor movement to join the ILWU, the ILA tomorrow, but also that there has to be a mobilization of labor. And what we've seen these past few weeks is young people and masses of people are going on the streets to protest, but no organized labor presence, no union contingents. The unions nationally, although they've made statements, haven't mobilized their membership. You think that there's a fear of some of the unions to mobilize their membership politically and get out in the streets and take action on the job?
Well, what I believe is, and I've said this before, you have unionists, trade unionists, and you have business unionists. The business unionists don't want to do anything progressive, and the unionists want to do things that are progressive and things that move the labor movement forward. In regards to the young people, this is a sign that our young generation is ready to make that connection with the labor movement. Our young people that you see marching up and down the street, they are laborers. They are working people. I think that we concentrate on the word union too much. We need to understand that anybody with a job, whether officially unionized or not, is in the biggest union of all, which is the labor movement. And everybody who works for a corporation or any employer entity is a member of that union. And we need to stand up collectively and demand that all working people, not just longshoremen, not just truck drivers or what have you, individuals. We need to stand up and make sure that all working people have an equal piece of the pie. That's what the ILWU's motto is: an injury to one is an injury to all, and we stand for equality amongst working people.
And we're speaking with Trent Willis, president of ILW Local 10 in San Francisco, and also Keith Shanklin, president of ILW Local 34, the clerks local. And Keith, the ILW has some slogans: an injury to one is an injury to all. And the ILW has taken action for Oscar Grant, for Mumia Abu Jamal. Why don't you talk about the history of the ILW? Because actually, as I know, there at one time in San Francisco, the ILW was the longshore was white, and as a result of the strike, the general strike, blacks came into the ILW Local 10, and the union fought for integration and equality. Can you talk about that, Keith?
Beginning when the strike back in 1934, you had what they called union busters, and there were people who were going and do things against labor and try to break down the working conditions of the union by using unforced labor, which was labor that was hired day by day to go in to break up the union people. Well, Harry and a couple of others had organized by going to the black churches because the dock bosses were using the black workers to try to bust up the union. So what Harry did, he went to the churches over here in the East Bay and asked the men, please, if you would not cross the line, which was people of color, we will offer you a job and get you into the union and make you whole. Because back then, there was some very seedy type walking bosses who was, using favors to give you a job. And we don't want to talk about some of the things that they did because it's not PG TV, okay? So I don't want to say what it is, but we all can imagine some of the things that went down with a guy getting a job, especially back in the 30s when it was very hard to even come up with a job. So once the strike was over, the integration started with the blacks and the whites. But even then, there was discord between the whites and the blacks because you had these things what we call gangs. And gangs were the backbone of the union because a lot of the work that were done on the docks were because of gangs, where you had men who would go into the hold and bring out 70-pound sacks on their backs and put them on carts and stack them 7 high, 10 deep. And it was very, very hard work, but it paid a good penny. So the black gangs usually would do more than the white gangs. So sooner or later, they became integrated because the production became a commodity. The more commodity you move, the more the gang got paid, or the more the gang got the slough money, which was the money that they would give you on the side. They had their little what they call slush money. That's where that term came from, slush money, that they paid to slush you up, to shut you up. So we move fast forward to 1979, where there was a lawsuit filed against the longshore to enter into the clerks union. Well, that didn't go too far because it got shut down by the court. But there were 7 people who decided not to give up. So they tried in 79, 80, 81, in 89. And finally, in 89, they were finally successful in breaking the color barrier into my union, which is Local 34. Now, the significance of that was those men each had to pay for their court costs to get into Local 34. And I remember one of the main participants who I had a long talk with before he retired said he paid something like maybe $139,000 between those years, and that was a lot of money if you consider back in the 80s spending $130,000. That's probably equivalent to what, maybe $500,000, maybe $2 million by now. So it was very hard to get into these unions back then. But once you got in, if you was a good worker, they let you stay, they let you hang around with them. But the minute that you showed any kind of softness, they would let you go, and they would bring in their white counterparts to replace you. But I want to say that to say this: I am the first African American president of Local 39. Okay, and I really wanted to say that my union is very strong now and is very diverse.
Trent, what do you hope to come out of this action on Juneteenth? You're calling on the rest of the trade union movement. Sarah Nelson has tweeted, she's president of the flight attendants, support for the action tomorrow, solidarity action on George Floyd's memorial. What do you hope coming out of this struggle and the labor action on Juneteenth?
Well, what I'm hoping personally, and I believe I can speak for my brothers and sisters in Local 10, we're hoping that this is just the beginning of a campaign to rid our society of systemic racism. Tomorrow is going to be the first step. Like my brother Keith Shanklin said, we will be stopping all cargo. We'll be stopping all machines, and we'll be laying down our tools at 9 a.m., which will coincide with the start of the funeral of brother Floyd. And we'll be doing that for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which represents the time that he laid on the ground and that racist cop had his knee in his neck. And we're hoping that with this new consciousness that seems to be, it seems like the world just all of a sudden caught on to what African Americans have been complaining about for centuries. I mentioned the freedom of slaves back in 1865, and that actually that's what I consider freedom on paper. But African Americans, Black people, we've never really been free, because we've continued to be, for generation after generation, victims of systemic racism. Even at the beginning of this interview, I gave you my personal experience with systemic racism, and that was just one experience. That was the worst experience I've ever had. This interview would be for 3 days if I went on and on about all of the experiences I've had with systemic racism and unfair treatment just because I was an African American. So now that we have the attention of our doubters and naysayers, now it's time to move forward and start making policy changes and start making demands to change a system that seems to be geared to, and I'm looking for the word to use here, to obstruct.
And profiteering. I mean, isn't there profit made on racism? That's...
Yeah, well, the whole capitalist system is built on racism. And in order for the powers that be to siphon all of the money to themselves, they have to have pieces of the puzzle in place, like racism, to keep the masses down. Any kind of way that these huge corporations and the people in power any kind of way they can use to divide us as a people, and I'm meaning all races of people, it benefits them to siphon funds and money to themselves. That's why you have such a huge, you notice while Donald Trump is in office, the wealth gap is getting larger and larger, because he is successful at roaring up his base, who are poor white people, and he gets them to believe that some kind of way they're better than everybody else when they're basically in the same boat. And they use them to keep their knees in our necks. So it's this country has a very wicked history that it needs to come to grips with. And while it's coming to grips with that history, we need to take advantage of that, and we need to make absolute change in some of the systematic items that are keeping us down as a people. This is just the start, because anything that you're trying to start, you first have to get people's attention, which this has definitely gotten people's attention, and then we need to move forward from here by making legislative changes, from this point on,
without being murdered by the police. So thanks for doing. Okay.
Right. So we're Steve, before we go, we're asking all citizens to join us, as well as working people all across the world. To reiterate, tomorrow at 9 a.m., we're going to be standing by a moment of silence for Brother Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And then we're asking the public and working people to join us on June 19th to celebrate Juneteenth and to raise awareness about systemic racism and all of the things that that capitalism has in place to destroy our society.
Donald Trump had got elected. There was two mechanics who drove a truck up and down the street at SSA with a rebel flag in the back, like they had won the lottery. Do you know that management did nothing about it? When we raised the issue about that they could do, that they were doing that, they wanted to come to us with free speech. But when we wanted to raise the issue about it, about their free speech, we got silence. Well, right now, we ain't silent no more. We coming strong.
Well, I want to thank Trent and Keith for joining us on WorkWeek and Pacifica. And we hope that the action is successful, and other workers around the country and around the world join in this struggle for worker rights and human rights, the right to live as a human being.